that appears to show more soldiers joining the protesters' cause. Libya's head of special forces, the latest Gaddafi ally, now rallying for his removal.
I place all my expertise and capabilities at the service of the youth revolution. I urge all honest members of the special forces to rejoin their units immediately and to protect the gains of the February 17th revolution and protect the lives of the Libyan people and their property.
And this video shows exactly why Libyans need protecting. Heavily armed men drag away a limp body and stuff it into a car. Uploaded on YouTube, it also can't be verified, but is said to be filmed in Tripoli during Friday's clashes. Painting a different picture, these images, shot by Associated Press on a government-sponsored media offensive under the restrictions of Gaddafi loyalists.
Tripoli is 100% safe. There are no problems. People are going about their business. There are no problems and people are going to work.
It would seem this vision is about as useful as state television to show what's really happening in Libya, or just how much longer its under-siege leader can hang on. Most of the oil-rich East has fallen into the hands of the opposition. There is a sense of security, but it's a volatile situation. The opposition also says it has taken control of oil refineries, now operating at a minimal capacity. For people here, the most important is to retain the gains, keep the momentum, while they wait and see what happens in the west of the country. Hud Abdelhamid, AlJazeera, Eastern Libya.
Well, some banks have reopened in the opposition-held city of Benghazi. It's a sign that life could slowly be getting back to normal. Dozens of Libyans lined up outside a bank which had been closed for days during the violence which forced pro-Gaddafi loyalists out of the city. Some banks had opened their doors on Thursday, but many people decided to wait to make sure the streets were safe. A new video has emerged from the eastern city of AlJazeera. It shows one of Muammar Gaddafi's palaces. Parts of it were destroyed during the unrest as protesters tried to take over the city and expel pro-Gaddafi forces. The palace had iron doors leading to underground tunnels, which are said to extend for several kilometres. Now, foreign governments and companies are scrambling to pull their citizens out of Libya. Hundreds have been arriving at nearby ports after being rescued by ships. Many more have been flown out of the country. Tarek Bazley has the details.
Relief and joy, one of a handful of Filipino workers to make it back to Manila. Edwin Bautista was evacuated by his French construction company.
There's so much killing there, even amongst themselves. We could have got attacked.
These are the lucky ones, but estimates suggest another 30,000 Filipinos, 60,000 Bangladeshis and around 23,000 Thai workers remain in Libya. The Chinese government has started its evacuation of some 30,000 nationals, these workers arriving by ship on the Greek island of Crete. Other nations too are pulling out their people. These Romanians, some of those evacuated from Libya on 2 military planes.
I think they are now at the period just before a civil war, 1000%. Benghazi and Tripoli don't understand each other. Benghazi doesn't want Gaddafi anymore. Tripoli wants him. That's why we came back. We don't want to be in a civil war.
And on the island of Malta, the arrival of more evacuees. More than 200 mainly Europeans arriving from Benghazi on the British naval ship the HMS Cumberland. A second warship has also been sent to Libya to help with rescue missions.
I had friends who were standing around in the streets and mercenaries would come around with plateless cars, and I had a group of friends, 3 of them, they got shot down, they got killed.
167 Americans, along with 118 people from other countries, have also arrived in Malta. Strong winds and high seas having delayed their ferry from leaving Tripoli.
First of all, it was only like Protestant, pro-government, the people just shouting for Gaddafi. Then they had machine guns next day and shooting everywhere. They were drunk or something. You can hear them shouting any words and shooting on the building walls.
As nations scramble to pull their citizens out of Libya, there are chaotic scenes at Tripoli airport. Thousands of people, many without the support of their governments or companies, have set up camp at the terminal. As the situation in the country becomes more desperate, so too are those wanting to escape abroad. Tarek Basley, Al Jazeera.
Jackie Rowland is live for us in Al-Baida in eastern Libya. Jackie, we were seeing earlier pictures of one of Gaddafi's palaces in Al-Baida, which have been quite heavily attacked during the violence. You've been there, haven't you? What did you see?
Yes, well, what we saw was a once sumptuous residence trashed, burned and looted. In fact, I'm going to show you something very telling. This is a copy of Muammar Gaddafi's famous Green Book. It's a rather incoherent, rambling diatribe of his ideas on various things such as politics, society and economics. Found this, you can see it's charred and it's wet. We found this just lying on the ground in this palace, which gives you some idea of the kind of respect that people... This was almost like the Quran or the Bible in Libya until a couple of weeks ago. Now kicked about on the ground, burned and soaking wet. I think that really tells a big story in itself. But I think the most interesting thing that we saw at the palace was the underground nuclear bunker. You went down various flights of stairs, through a number of doors which could be hermetically sealed, through a real rabbit warren of passages, and in the heart of the nuclear bunker, a whole control box for controlling an air system where air would be circulated and filtered, emergency power supplies, a water system. Clearly, Colonel Gaddafi feared that there was a risk of some kind of a nuclear attack on Libya, and he actually had these systems in place, and we could see that engineers checked them regularly, and it was most recently checked just 6 weeks ago, which gives you some kind of insight into the kind of paranoia which must have gripped Muammar Gaddafi.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating description of one of the man's palaces there, Jackie. Of course, Al-Baida now in the hands of protesters. What effect is Gaddafi's defiance having on them? Because they must be hoping that he's removed from power, but fearful about what happens if he's not.
Well, yes, and the situation is far from cut and dry. Just as we're standing here talking to you, Shuli, and we've been hearing, it's light arms fire, but there is shooting going on not far from here. And as you drive around, sure, here the town is in the hands of anti-Gaddafi forces. As everywhere you go, people are giving you the V for Victory sign. People are saying, welcome to free Libya. We visited just a couple of hours ago a military base, an air base, where the entire group of airmen on the base had deserted around the 16th or 17th of this month. They said that they were no longer with Gaddafi. They said that they had been attacked both on the land and from the air by forces and by aircraft loyal to Gaddafi. We asked them whether they were afraid, such open defiance, were they afraid of the consequences? They said no. And one of the officers there told me that he believes that although Gaddafi does have a certain amount of weaponry left, although he's alleged to have brought in thousands of African mercenaries to fight on his behalf, officers at that air base at Labrok, about 20 kilometers away from where we are now, believe that Muammar Gaddafi has probably only got a couple of weeks before he's likely to be brought down by opposition forces.
What about communications with the rest of the country? Are you getting any information about what's happening out of Tripoli, for example, or are people there getting information about their friends and relatives elsewhere in the country?
Well, and you can probably hear the gunfire again as I'm just starting to answer you. I mean, there are mobile phone communications. Shortly after we entered Libya on Friday, we stopped on the way and one man was on the mobile telephone to a friend of his in Tripoli. He passed the phone to me and I asked the man, what's the situation in Tripoli? And he replied, mia b'mia, 100%. I don't know if he was being ironic there, but people are in contact with friends and relatives, but at the moment it's like another planet, it's another world. And we have seen some images, almost surreal in fact. We saw images of Muammar Gaddafi appearing on a balcony and greeting the crowds beneath, saying that he was going to open up arms caches and allow them to help themselves to weapons to defend him. But it is clear that although although the opposition forces necessarily are not well organised on an international level, we meet people who describe themselves as local defence committees. We've met people who've described themselves as members of the so-called provisional government. Nevertheless, Muammar Gaddafi is looking increasingly isolated in those remaining strongholds to the west of the country.
Jackie, thanks very much indeed for that. Jackie Rowland in Al Bayd there. Well, the UN Security Council is meeting again today to firm up a draft resolution calling for sanctions against Gaddafi and his government. Turkey's Prime Minister has criticised the sanctions, warning that Libyan people will suffer most. During a UN meeting late on Friday, Libya's ambassador denounced Gaddafi. 3 days earlier, he'd called his friend. Mohammed Shalham also criticised Gaddafi's attacks on civilians. In an emotional speech, Shalham said he could not believe the violence the leader was inflicting on his own people. Well, UN Chief Ban Ki-moon also urged the UN to act right away. He gave harrowing details of the violence.
Estimates indicate that more than 1,000 people have been killed. The eastern part of the country is reported to be under the control of opposition elements who have taken over arms and ammunition from weapon depot. There are daily clashes in at least 3 cities near Tripoli. The streets of the capital are largely deserted. People cannot leave their houses for fear of being shot by government forces or militias. Colonel Gaddafi's supporters are reportedly conducting house-by-house searches and arrests. According to some reports, they have even gone into hospitals to kill wounded opponents.
Let's go live to UN headquarters and Al Jazeera's Kristen Salumi. Kristen, can we expect any action from the Security Council today?
I spoke to one Western diplomat this morning, and he told me there is incredible momentum and an incredible sense of urgency to get something passed through the Security Council today. The French ambassador himself spoke to journalists yesterday after the Emergency Security Council meeting and made a rare prediction that there would indeed be a resolution passed today. And I say rare because diplomats are usually pretty reluctant to go on the record in front of cameras and make a prediction like that when there are so many countries who have to come together and negotiate on a resolution like this. One sticking point that we're hearing about this draft resolution is a referral of the situation in Libya to the International Criminal Court. That is something that is in the draft resolution, and there are